Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to this week's episode of the Working in Hockey podcast. I'm your host, Nick Bowins, and today I'm joined by a very special guest. Leafs fans, you definitely recognize this face on the screen right now. David Alter, reporter and site manager of the Hockey News Toronto. David, sorry to bug you in the off season, but how are things going?
It's never a bother, Nick. I appreciate it. This has been awesome. It's going well. I love this time of year. I can really unwind, and I just feel like I have more time, but also itching to kind of, get right back at it with like real news and real hockey stuff that I'm sure every hockey fan is want to get back into.
Yes, we all enjoy the break. Well, it kind of first hits that first week or two, and then we're all itching for it to come
Yeah.
back. But hop right in here, David. Tell the people a little bit about your role, your endeavor with the Hockey News Toronto, how it came to be, and what you guys are up to today.
Yeah, so it's actually funny. It started in the beginning of 2021. I had just left a job I was doing. It was like a freelance job at TSN where I was working on the web team, just putting up stuff on a website. But it was a job I accepted back in 2018 that I intended for it to only be temporary. But in the end, I just decided I really want to get back to reporting. I really want to kind of find a way. I'm 38 at this point. I really need to kind of get back to what people know me for, but also what I really like doing. And it was a pandemic, so that was like obviously a big self-reflection moment for a lot of people, but for me, it was just kind of crystallizing everything that I started in 2021 doing stuff with the Hockey News. They had this vision where they wanted to do a separate team site, which was great, but they didn't really have the execution of that down. Ended up leaving because they couldn't figure out the back end. In the summer of 2022, I finally got SI.com. We launched Inside the Maple Leafs, which was really how to launch the site with the SI badging or established place badging, where it's a rev share site. We started trying to do that. It got re-merged back with the Hockey News in March of 2023, and so I've been there ever since. But it's been a great partnership so far. We just hit 1.5 million on thn.com/Toronto. So that's been really good. And it's nice to see when you get those, because it really does provide you with real kind of authentication or validation that what you envisioned was correct, and it's been awesome so far.
Absolutely. No, that's awesome. And it definitely pops up on my timeline quite a bit, which is more validation there, I hope. How many people are on the team there at the Hockey News Toronto right now?
We've got one writer and one intern. The intern we're in the process of converting to another paid writer
Nice.
because he's been amazing. His name's Evan, and he's been really good. Nick has also been really well as like for us since for the past year. Nick Barden, with him, I kind of identified early in the site. Okay, I mean, I don't know where the site's going to go, but I really could use someone who's got Marley's expertise, and I really want this site to kind of be everything for everybody, Leaf News wise. Which was definitely a bit of a change from what I was used to as someone who's now in their 40s and like just hard news and all that stuff. But I really wanted this site to be everything for everybody, and so they've been great. It's a team of three, and we're hopefully maybe looking to grab another intern in the fall semester if you know anyone that would be interested as well. Someone who needs the credit. So for that fall winter. But my hope is to kind of keep growing it every third of the year, provided the numbers keep growing.
Awesome. Yeah, no, totally. And I think they will, and there will definitely be a lot of people interested in a role like that with you guys there. I want to take it all the way back here, David. How did you first kind of get into writing, reporting, hockey in general? Where did the passion come from? When did you realize this is what you wanted to do?
Yeah, so I'm gonna date myself, but I went to Western. I ended up studying economics, but I was originally an actuarial sciences major. Like my strength was math. I
Yeah.
thought, okay, maybe I want to do something math. Maybe I want to do something business.
Yep.
But it was a weird journey. In my second year at Western, I was put on a media faculty floor because I lived in res again for another year, and they were just kind of filling out the numbers. And the frosh that were there kind of convinced me, hey, let's go to like a campus radio info session. I wasn't really interested. I didn't think it was for me. But then I found out that they did play by play for varsity sports. And I was like, whoa, I didn't know that existed. And that students can do it. Before I knew it, I spent more time there than I ever did in class. And then I found out, a lot of established people in the industry had come from this radio station. So as I kept doing it and loving it more, and I thought, or kind of deluded myself, I thought at the time that maybe I can make this a career. My parents weren't too happy about that, but long story short, I emailed the program director at the Fan, or the sports director at the Fan. That turned into an internship in 2006, which turned into an 8-year employment at the Fan 590, where I was a reporter, sportscaster. Like I was a broadcaster first, but I always felt I always felt I was very tech savvy. I was the first one to get them to start remotely from your iPods at the time. Instead of driving all the way back to the station and wasting time. Before Twitter was even around, radio was Twitter, because like your first way to report the news was get there where there's not blocked programming. Anyway, I worked at Sportsnet 590 The Fan, which is called now it's called now, from 2006 to 2014, where I was a Leaf reporter for the last 3 years. Then I worked at the Leafs for one season, writing and doing all kinds of stuff. Then I wrote I actually got a staff reporting position for the National Post in 2015. Then I was at The Athletic during their launch in the 2016-17 season. But it's been in the industry. Like I've been bit by layoffs, by crazy things that happen. Some of them pretty demoralizing, but I've loved the journey of it now when I look back on it, because I've gotten a lot of crazy experience at different places I wouldn't have been able to otherwise. I've been to 2 Olympic Games, kind of missing out what it was like kind of being there when I'm watching it on TV now, or wherever we're watching it. But yeah, it's been a crazy. I've worked. It's almost easier to say where I haven't worked as opposed to where I've worked at this point. And then I've even worked at between. I've had crazy gigs where I worked at Twitter, which was a wild experience. I worked at I did social media for the IIHF for 2 World Hockey Championships, which took me to Prague and Russia, which
Very
was
cool.
pretty awesome. So I've had a lot of crazy gigs along the way.
No, that's awesome. And I think looking back on it, I think you'd feel like all those different experiences and roles and companies it help shape you a lot, right? You get to see how different people operate. You get to meet so many different people. And I did want to touch on kind of just the writing industry as a whole there. There's always seems to unfortunately be layoffs, and it's tricky to
Yeah.
find long-term stable kind of gigs with companies these days in writing. Talk to me kind of about that resiliency, landing on your feet, finding new opportunities, and how important building your relationships to get to that point is.
The relationships are hugely important. It's tough because when you go through a layoff where you feel like there's some sort of precursor to it, sometimes there's this tendency to take it personally. The first time that happened, I did take it personally because I kind of saw it coming for a long period of time.
Sure.
And then the hard part was, even when I went to other places, that can motivate you, and it certainly did. It helped me be very defiant about it and bet on yourself and do all those things. But then if something didn't go right, those drops could be very hard, and it can start questioning yourself, and like you start going through self-doubt and everything. It's really hard not to wear what you do emotionally, because we're doing this because we love it. We're not doing it for any other reason. And so when you finally get that sense of accomplishment, then it gets taken away. It's hard. It really is. But the relationships, as important as they are key. But I think the number one thing is belief in yourself and what you feel you bring that maybe separates yourself from some others. And so I look back on all those periods and what are those for me? Now I can honestly say them. I've always been a huge tech nerd. Like I'm my industry, I'm always on top of the newest products and gadgets because I look at those as how are those things going to help me do the job faster and more efficient than anybody else? And maybe I can jump on that and be an early adopter of it. So, and that's an ever-changing landscape. Everyone always feels like, oh, well, that's already been discovered. So, like, I've missed the boat. No, you haven't. There's always new things coming up that you just never know where you can jump on it and be of value. So there's that. Um, and just using those skills to share that. So I touched on it a little bit in 2006 when I worked at the radio station. I looked at ways to kind of be more productive. Uh, in 2006, communication mobility wise was through Blackberries. I was one of the few interns that had a Blackberry, and it was a hand me down from my brother. It was like a used one, so I got it. And I was in a sea of 20 interns. I'm like, how am I going to stand apart from 20 other interns when there's like very few jobs out there? So I stayed late one shift and I got an engineer there to like because I was like, I need to get this work email that they give us on our actual BlackBerry. Back then, that was not easy to do. Now we're trying to like get away from
Do
our
the
phone.
opposite. Yeah.
Back then, it was so hard to do, and I stayed there until we figured out a way, and I got it. And then in the subsequent weeks during my internship, anytime our sports director sent out, "Hey, who can do this?" I was always the first to respond, yes. And that was just something I found early on that helped me set myself apart from others. And sometimes it's just those little micro hacks along the way that just go a long way, like that you can separate yourself from others that way. And so that's just one example. But at every other place, I kind of found, hey, how can I do this different and faster than anybody else? And
Yeah.
that's really been the key to my longevity, I think.
No, that's awesome. And like we said kind of before hitting record here, it's the simple things, it's the little things, doing them really well. Being
Yeah.
able to be the first one to respond to your boss's email. You're not leaving that up to chance by getting your email on the BlackBerry there. Speaking of kind of tech advancements and everything, I work for a tech company day to day here. The AI revolution or whatever we want to call it is quite interesting, I think. How do you look at AI coming into the world of journalism, reporting, etc., what you do day to day?
Yeah, it's a tough one because everyone's worried about plagiarism, worried about your words, worried about a lot of those things. I use AI very, very adjacent. I'm not a primary user of it. I'm more worried about the backlash that could occur from Google search, from a lot of other things, where if AI is detected, you can be deprioritized. Like there, you have your reputation to work under. So there is that. But there was an app that I discovered. Unfortunately, it was only 3 to 4 months, or it was like 2 months left in the season that totally changed my transcription life. And that was it's by an independent programmer. It's only available on Macs right now, and it's called Mac Whisper. And a lot of writers are like, "Oh yeah, Otter has AI and all this other stuff," but like I see this transcription and it's awful. It's not user friendly. I can't like. I'd rather rely on myself. This programmer made something, even gave me a discount because I was a journalist. I paid for it. I take all my audio, I put it in there, and I can listen along and listen to it in 1.5 times speed. And if it's a 10-minute interview, I can have it fully transcribed with proper grammar and sentence structure in 5 minutes. The whole thing. The whole thing. And I like maybe have to make 6 or 7 changes. And they're like basic ones, and it gets better as you learn. That's where I feel like AI really does help because it allows you to do the job better. It doesn't replace the job. Like I see a lot of people putting in ChatGPT and having right. I'm like, that don't do that. Like sometimes if I'm struggling with the right word for a headline and I want good Google SEO, I'll look to maybe some suggestions for Google headlines or like through AI, but then just use my own words anyway. But
Totally.
like sometimes we'll be like, oh, I just didn't think of that word. To
Yes.
me, it's become
Yeah.
another thesaurus and in that way for SEO optimization. And so little things like that have really helped in terms of proper picture, proper all that other stuff. But outside of that, I'm very weary of AI because as you know, like I think it's a helpful tool, but we don't know exactly where it's going to go. And you don't want to lean too hard into it.
Yeah, no, I think that's a very interesting conversation that we could probably fill up an entire
Yeah.
podcast with. Like you said, I use it for a lot of thought starters to get, kind of see a different word, see a different idea. But like you said, I think creatives, whether that's journal, whether that's video, whatever, creatives will always have their place. AI can't replace that. I want to get into a little bit more of kind of your day-to-day role. I watch the Leaf scrums after games when I'm super happy or super sad. I hear you, I see you. What's
Yeah.
kind of the day-to-day like for yourself during the season there, David?
It's a lot. I mean, I go to all 82 games and playoffs, which in today's day and age is kind of unheard of. It's actually one of those things early on I thought, okay, well, how can I do that? How can I bootstrap it?
Mhm.
I have a newsletter for that, which we can talk about later. But yeah, it's a lot. Like you're going to every availability when you can. So it's morning skates, practices. Practices are usually later after games, which is nice because you can sleep a little bit more or whatever. But on top of that, I'm trying to book flights, trying to book hotels. Like I honestly do feel like I'm doing 5 or 6 jobs at once, like more than most people. So I'll usually, let's see, if it's practice day at home, um usually it's after a game. Sometimes it isn't. Sometimes it's either 11 or 12 or whatever. So I wake up the day before. I'm usually getting content plans, getting them scheduled out. But then I'm going to practice. I'm watching practice. I'm usually there about 30 minutes early when doors open. So we could just kind of see what's out there, do some observations, tweets. Um, I'm on a WhatsApp with my team about, hey, there's this stuff happening. Let's get this stuff up on the website. And then I'm just going, watching practice, interviewing players, requesting players, getting that stuff out, transcribing, and putting out content. And it kind of feels like it's all day because there's always something, right? So there, and then on a game day, it's even longer because they have a morning skate, which is earlier,
Yeah.
and then you pretty much split your shift. If you're lucky enough, you can go home. There's some people I know who don't, or one person. Sometimes it's me, sometimes there's another person as well. Usually there's one person's always there all day, depending on your living situation.
Yeah.
And then you can split the day that way, but we have content to put out all day. And so then there's that, and then there's covering the game itself and watching the game from the press box. And so that's an all involved day where you're putting up content all the time. And that's not including if I'm on a flight and then I'm hoping there's Wi-Fi available so I could put up content there and getting to my hotel and just doing all that. But that's why we're expanding because, now with us having three, we can offload a little bit more of those responsibilities and I can
Sure.
get back to, the day-to-day elements of it. But that's just part of doing it as a business. And so there's a lot, even on off days, I feel like there's content still to go. You try to rest on the one day off a week you have, but sometimes I'm either traveling because I'm not taking a charter flight.
Yeah.
So it's the next day flight, depending on where they are or where they're going. This year will be a little bit different because there's a 2 week break in the schedule for the Four Nations, and that should help things. That should mean fewer morning skates because of the back to backs. But yeah, so it'll be interesting for sure. If it were up to me, I'd abolish morning skates. I think they're completely pointless.
I think a lot of players would agree with you too, but
The
no,
newer
that's
ones, not the old school.
yes, yes,
Yeah.
the
So
newer
we're
one.
still a ways away from that.
Yes, grandfather it in over time. But no, I think that's super interesting to hear kind of the day to day and the logistics
Yeah.
there. And, like we said before, you've worked for a number of different news outlets and networks in the city there. We touched on the relationships, relationships with the players, relationships with your fellow media members. You're seeing the same faces there every single day, right? How
Mhm.
important when you're changing roles, you're going to different cities, is your relationships not only with the players, but the other media members there, right?
It's important. I mean, look, there's times now where there's a lot of reporters that are not traveling and
Mhm.
covering visiting games, and they still have a job to do that way. And you can kind of be like, hey, whatever. But I mean, it goes quid pro quo, right? Like sometimes we'll do a report based on their story. So it's as long as you're following proper journalistic practices and giving proper credit and doing all those things, it's fine. Generally, the relationship has been pretty good. I mean, if someone needs a favor or something from me or whatever, I'm generally happy to do it and vice versa. So I think that relationship is good as far as players goes. It depends on who and what and why. Like, unfortunately, we're living in a society now, like since post-COVID, where fewer guys are kind of available than there used to be, in terms of how often and all that stuff.
Mhm.
So that part's changing a little bit, not always for the better. And so, sometimes as a journalist, it's your responsibility as a member of the Professional Hockey Writers Association when you see that to say that and to report that, just because you don't want new precedents being set. So it's important to have a relationship with the players, with the media members, but also the media relations staff as well. So there's a lot going on in that regard that you're trying to measure. And generally, everyone's pretty respectful that they know that everyone's got a job to do. And so you just hope it continues that way. You see what happens in news journalism and you worry about precedents being set and things like that and hate speech and ridiculous stuff that goes on in the world today. Like generally I pick sports because I was trying to avoid that.
Man.
But you never know. Just people can be unhinged sometimes, and you just have to kind of know how to call it out diplomatically and just go about your business.
No, I think that's well said. And I want to get into a little bit of now that you're doing kind of your own thing there with the Hockey News Toronto, the old balance of quality versus quantity.
Yeah.
You're a big name, a big voice in the market. People come to you, they trust your stories and everything. So you got to walk that line of everything you have to do is quality. But like you said, there's always things going on. There's always eyeballs in Toronto. You always want to get things on the site. How do you balance, quality versus quantity and choosing what needs to be covered?
Yeah, so it's tough. I mean, we're in August now, right? And it's not the most newsworthy month.
Yeah.
And I developed a team, and a lot of why I developed the team is because I think when you're running a site, you're a journalist, but you also have to have content, right? Like you have to feed the beast. So how are you going to do that? And how are you going to do that respectfully? And I've come to learn over the last couple of years of doing this is that you might have your journalistic integrity, and that's very important, and people will follow that. But your site also has to be everything to everybody, like in that regard as well. And so, we might put up a post. Max Domi posted about his cat on Instagram. That's what we're gonna do because it may not, you may question yourself being like, why are you putting something out there? But if fans care about it, you want your people going to your site as a one-stop shop for everything, so they know that every stone is turned, right? Like that everything. And so that's essentially what it's all about at that point. And so Nick and Evan and the guys, they know like this is part of it. Like the site has to feed the beast. If you're going to have growth that you want and do all that stuff, that's important. So you've got to really be able to do that. So there is that, but there's a line. Like today I saw, and I took a screen grab because I saw this site that was getting a lot of traffic, and they it looks completely AI generated, and it looks like it's going based on a trade proposal off a commenter off a salary cap site. There's so much things that it's not really there, but the algorithm is taking it as that. I'm like, no, that's where you draw the line. Like if you're going to have a smoking gun to write about something, where it comes from has to have some weight. And if it doesn't have weight, then you're going to lose people, and you might get that one sugar high, but then you just but that's why we pay for like we pay out of pocket to go on the road to cover every game, because the journalistic integrity and being there still matters. So that's why we do that, but we also do everything. We've got to be everything for every Leaf fan. That's what the site needs to be.
Exactly. No, I think that's well said, and I think that was a big learning for me too through Hockey Collective on Instagram and other platforms. There's like there's something for everybody. Like everybody is interested in something. We're covering hockey, sure, but there's so many different lanes within it, right? From Max Domi's cat to what's Mitch Marner's contract to everything in between. Everybody
Yeah.
is going to be interested in different things, and as the outlet, you've got to cover it all if you want to compete in today's pretty crowded landscape. But David, going forward from there, I want to get into some advice with you here.
Yeah.
Super simple question to start it off, but what's kind of the best career advice that you've gotten through your career and you can pass on to others?
Career advice. One is learn how to take a lot of crap and not show it. Like you just have to, sometimes you have to eat a crap sandwich and just kind of shrug it off and not let you and not wear it. So I would say there's that. Um, Early in your career, don't say no to anything. Even if you feel like you're worth more or whatever, the equity is in the experience early on. One thing I like to tell people is evaluate yourself at wherever you are in 6 month increments. If you feel like you're growing towards something, then you don't need to think about it again for the next 6 months. But if you're not growing, then you have to start actively looking elsewhere and seeing where you're going. Especially in today's landscape where everything is changing, your actual value is going to change, even if you're at a salaried position, that you almost have to constantly look at what you're doing, what you're building towards, and if it makes sense. So early on, that's tough. Like you're a student, you're just trying to get the experience. So you want to build towards something. So that's what you do. But you'll reach a point, and I reached it because I worked in my 20s in a traditional place, and the landscape changed. Always be evaluating yourself. Not everything is money because you didn't go into this industry for it. Just look at the full equity. Are you seeing full equitable growth in yourself at this place with each 6 months? A lot of places don't care about it or don't look at it. They're just worried about getting through the day. Look about what's going to allow you to grow from an equitable standpoint and be open to other monetization opportunities as much as you can.
No, I think that's very well said. And I think with the growth piece, a lot of times people are looking for that growth so quickly today.
Yeah,
Social media definitely protrudes that kind of overnight success, overnight growth. And you and I both know that that's not the real world. Things
no.
are not just done overnight. So I think that's a great piece of advice there. And then particularly for aspiring reporters, journalists, where would you suggest that they are learning these days? What should they be consuming? How should they be kind of pursuing their career?
Yeah, it's tough. It all depends on if you're like what age level you're at, how much experience you have. I would say journalists make the best PR people too, because they generally know, like I see a lot of journalists become PR people because they generally know how they think. So there is that. But I just look at new skills. That's what I would just tell people. If you're there, go to Product Hunt. Like that's one of my favorite websites to see how people are using different programs and just constantly be learning how to do things. The pandemic was great for me for that in 2020 when we had a lot of time. I watched YouTube videos of stuff that resonated with me about just how I can kind of take care of stuff so that I'm not catastrophizing things every day, because you'd be surprised how much time you waste being in a woe is me moment instead of just working towards something. Even if you don't see growth that day, there is growth. It's all compounding. Everything in life is compounding. There's a lot I wish I can kind of go back and revert and fix, but yeah, just start, just always look at the present and future, and don't be looking back.
Awesome. No, I think that's a great piece of advice as well. And David, truly can't thank you enough for taking the time to do this. I think you've got an awesome path, an awesome story, and an awesome platform in the Hockey News Toronto. Tell the people where they can find you and what they can expect from you guys.
Yeah, so thn.com/Toronto is the website. I'm at Dalter on Twitter, Dalter. I also have a newsletter, which I'm just launching back, called The Road.biz. And it's all about how I do this for a living, like how I kept my travel expenses down this year, how I was able, like I had one post where I did the whole Sweden trip for $600, room and hotel, like 4-star accommodations and everything. Like just that the financial and business element of it. Because as I told you, like it's funny, like I studied what I studied, didn't think I'd need it. And then, the salary cap and all this other
Yeah,
stuff came, and it's like you'd never be surprised. That's one other piece of advice. Even if you think you're doing something that you're above, you'll never know what you'll learn at that job that will help you for the next thing. So that's another
100%.
like big piece of advice. But the road.biz, cannot tell you, that's like it's my favorite passion project, because it's like your newsletter does. It's trying to help people grow as a business and as themselves as well.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I'm definitely gonna check that out, and I'm a sucker for all that kind of just learning from real people. I think at the end of the day, that's what you're doing with the newsletter there. That's what I'm trying to do with working in hockey. Learn from real people, real stories. No more curated content online. I want to learn from these real things. So, David, thank you so much for the time here. Guys, be sure to subscribe to the Working in Hockey podcast.